there's a variety of reasons that you can find when you look at these individual cases. In most of them, there's a culmination of factors, maybe not just one specific one, but a number that kind of come together and result in this official faculty uprising against the president.
You need to be sitting on the same side of the table making those
Right.
decisions. It
You,
takes training, it takes process, it takes empowerment, a new kind of structure. And if we don't do that, right, then that conflict's going to be very difficult to resolve in this environment.
that was Mike Nietzel and then Chuck Ambrose speaking about their new book, No Confidence: When College Faculty Turn Against Their Presidents. We had a great conversation about the tensions or disconnects that lead to votes of no confidence, how these impact student success, and what to do about it to proactively avoid them, like orientation, education and training, rethinking governance structures, and more. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Connected College Podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Felix. I've helped more than 100 colleges and universities change what they offer, how they operate, and the way they're organized to enable student success. Join me for insightful interviews with higher ed innovators sharing the stories, stats, and strategies to create better connected colleges and universities. Mike and Chuck, I'm so excited for our conversation about Votes of No Confidence, your upcoming book, and the impact this has on student success. So welcome to the Connected College Podcast.
Thank you, Elliot. Good morning.
It's always good, Elliot, to connect with the connected college.
Yes, let's see how many, if people have a bingo card, let's see how many times we can say connect. I think
There
we're
you
up to
go.
3 or 4. This is exciting. To get started, can you all introduce yourselves and give us a sense of how you got started in higher ed and what you're up to today?
I'm Mike Nietzel. I came to higher ed by virtue of the rescue of a faculty member. I had started in the PsyD program at the University of Illinois, which was aimed at preparing practitioners in clinical psychology. I didn't like it. I quit. I went to Fort Riley to fulfill my summer basic training for becoming a commissioned second lieutenant. Because of a history of seizures, I flunked the physical. And a psychology faculty member, Doug Bernstein, took me back into the PhD program at Illinois, and I finished it and went on to a career in higher ed after that, at the University of Kentucky for most of my life, and then at Missouri State University as president from 2005 through 2010.
And since then, you've written 17,000 articles, all of which are amazing, right?
After I retired at Missouri State, I went to work for the governor as his policy advisor. I did that for 6 or 7 years, and then fully retired only to decide I'd write as a senior contributor for Forbes. So yeah, I do regular articles for Forbes online on higher ed. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, they are really a delight, and you really have your finger on the pulse of things, and they're a great resource, I think, for higher ed leaders keeping your pulse on things and shining up your crystal ball as to where they're headed, which is great too. Chuck, what about you? What's your story?
Elliot, I went to college in 1979 and never left. So I had a hard time getting out. And as Mike mentions influencers, I have to think about Dr. Johns, the president of Furman, and the former president, Gordon Blackwell, who was actually one of the forefathers at Florida State of the modern student personnel movement, who just made it look, Elliot, like it was a very fun job to be a college president. So I kind of left college thinking I wanted to be one and have either worked for presidents or was one for quite a long time, and served 12 years as president of Pfeiffer University, a small Methodist school in North Carolina. And then Mike and I's world collided in Missouri when he was president of Missouri State and then governor's advisor. And it was just one of those partnerships, Elliot, where when a campus could work in a policy partnership with the governor to accomplish what we all hope for college, that we just had a lot of fun. Mike was an all-on partner on holding costs down and increasing completion and having the governor resource the things that were important and maybe use resources a little differently, and then it ended up a couple years in philanthropy, a little turnaround at Henderson State that was the foundation of some of our work, and where Mike writes 3 hours every morning, I talk 3 hours every morning. And so co-authorship for us is a high level of dependency on Mike's just incredible ability to put thoughts to paper. So it's been a lot of fun, and this is just another project that we enjoyed doing together.
Yeah, let's dive into the book. Tell us a little bit about it. It's called No Confidence When College Faculty Turn Against Their Presidents. And tell us a little bit about how it came to be through the 3 hours of writing and talking every morning.
I think it was an outgrowth of our recognition that no confidence votes against university presidents and chancellors were on the rise. I had covered some for Forbes, and we began to discuss the fact that these seem to be increasing in frequency. Um, since the late 1980s, you've had somewhere between 250 to 300 no confidence votes. And we have a specific definition of that, Elliot, which confines it to a vote against a president or a chancellor by a faculty senate or a faculty at large or some other duly constituted university governance group. And so we looked at about 75 of those case histories spanning that time period to identify what were the trends, what were some of the common elements to them, what were the fractures that led to the rise in no confidence votes. And then we attempt at the end of the book to make recommendations about how to avoid them. I think we were careful throughout the book to recognize that they have their place. As former university presidents, we don't like to see them happen, but we recognize there are situations in which it's a legitimate expression of dissatisfaction with the way a university or college is being run by its leader. So that's it in a nutshell, an attempt to understand what led to these votes, what were the common elements, and what can be done to make them as rare as possible, recognizing that there's still a legitimate exercise of faculty voice.
It's not great when it happens, but you've done a great job of understanding when it's happened and why it's happened. And it's an incredibly timely book. One of the things I wrote about in the Connected College, so I think, Chuck, we're up to 4 or 5, is 47% of presidents don't believe that their faculty understand the challenges confronting the institution, which to me speaks to some of this tension that you talk about in the book. And I would love to pull on that thread. You called it fracturing, but I'm calling it tension between administration and faculty or other areas. Can you talk a little bit about those fractures, those disconnects, those tensions, Chuck?
Yeah, Elliot, I love Mike's description because many of these tenets or things, especially as presidents, you work every day trying to avoid, right? Conflict, dissonance, angst, anxiety, fear in this environment. And I do think that this inflection point offers us an opportunity to convert the narrative. As universities, we're very poor, right, at being teaching institutions of how the institution actually works. I think in the conversations that we had with faculty leadership, Mike, we would say that maybe that 47% number by presidents is a gross underestimate of really knowing. And it's a little bit, Elliot, of an outgrowth of Mike and I's willingness to take what was the concepts that, again, you work to avoid, like financial exigency or no confidence votes, and educate, right? People about what they really mean, what they can serve purpose with. We've jokingly said that it does eliminate you from invitations to certain cocktail parties, right? Because I actually had a board when I walked in carrying a copy of my book saying, we're not going to talk about that, are we? Maybe you need to. And so in the no confidence construct,
So not talking about uncomfortable stuff is probably not a great idea, right?
we've done it for decades, right,
Yeah,
as an industry.
personally or
Any number.
professionally. Yeah.
Right. So it's a little bit, Elliot, of a let's move from the reactive to a proactive approach to a lot of things to educate campuses and to then engage. And I think we'll get to this, engage more people in decision making and ownership of the things that really matter.
I think what struck me in the book is you did such a great job of helping people understand this complicated, uncomfortable kind of situation. And you pointed out some of these like historical tensions, admin, faculty, or board administration, or the tension between a college president or chancellor as more and more acknowledging that they're like running a very large and complicated business versus maybe a historical parliamentary procedure, or the tension between being transparent, but then also that sometimes that transparency can create risk. So I think you highlighted those things. And I wonder what are some of the causes of those tensions as you see them?
We, in the book, Elliot, looked at 8 different categories of no confidence votes. And the two that were, I think, the most predominant were breakdowns in the traditions of shared governance, where
Hmm.
faculty, administration, and governing boards each have a role to play in making major decisions about university policies and practices. That was one. And the second was disagreements over financial priorities or allegations that the president had financially mismanaged the institution. Those are probably the two most common. Um, the others involve personality clashes where just got sick of the president or chancellor and his or her kind of most dominant traits. Um, Allegations that they had mismanaged personnel decisions. Famous case at the University of Illinois over that with the Chancellor Phyllis Wise. Um, Decisions having to do with how to handle the pandemic was another one, and actually accounted for a lot of the more recent no confidence votes. Was faculty unhappiness about decisions that the administration made over how the campus would respond to the pandemic. We looked at allegations of personal misconduct. Those are relatively rare, but they almost always result in the vote of no confidence. We looked at um, no confidence votes that arose out of disagreements over how to handle student protests, particularly after the war between Hamas and Israel and Gaza. Um, we looked at just general concerns about poor planning and leadership, whether it had to do with sagging enrollment or fundraising. There's a variety of reasons that you can find when you look at these individual cases. In most of them, there's a culmination of factors, maybe not just one specific one, but a number that kind of come together and result in this official faculty uprising against the president.
I think that's a really useful taxonomy. And one of the things I find really interesting is the relationship between strategy and shared governance. Because on the one hand, like shared governance sometimes is the means and sometimes it's seen as the goal. And one of the things that was startling for me in my own research was finding, I think the AUP used to have this shared governance award, and I looked at who won it. And gosh, quite a few of those schools, I don't recognize the names, and it's
Right.
because they don't exist anymore. And some of them are doing great, but if everyone's agreeing and there's great consensus, that's not necessarily ensuring success if you're agreeing on the wrong strategy, right? So everybody could be agreed that we're going to head in the wrong direction. So how do you strike that balance between strategy that might lead to some discord or make some people uncomfortable or make some hard choices, but at the same time embrace shared governance to get there and to execute it?
Yeah, Elliot, we had some key learnings ourselves. One was the growing tide of no confidence votes against newer presidents, which again was underlined by another key learning. And we really tried to remove our bias as former presidents because presidents do have a perspective about moving culture forward and when that culture doesn't perhaps agree or it's uncomfortable. But no one really teaches senior leaders and or faculty leadership what shared governance really means and how it works. So when we say shared governance, I imagine the three of us, now Mike and I have talked and worked a lot on shared governance together, but we still may have subtle differences about what that really means and what good looks like. And again, I think when we look forward, retooling ourselves to have the capacity to not only know what it means, but how to do it is absolutely critical because there's obviously a growing tide of research right now that the college presidency, there's just no way you're going to avoid making hard decisions that are going to affect people. There's just no way.
Yeah. And the idea, I think one of the other things you point out in the book, which is great, is maybe this would work in another time, but the idea that you have these three key constituencies and you have these three core responsibilities of mission, finances, and curriculum, and you can each take one is outdated, right? Because they're so intertwined, especially at a time like today we're in, where you're making these complex, unprecedented decisions, many of which are irreversible and have high stakes and have never been made before about should we merge? How should we focus? Which programs do we have to prioritize? Should we expand? If so, with who? I think we're in an interesting time.
Those are all questions, Elliot, that shared governance, when it works well, I think is a very helpful process. We tried to make a distinction between those long-term, intermediate term decisions that a university had to make and the ones that they need to make in a crisis, like how to respond to the pandemic, how to respond to campus protests. Those don't lend themselves as well to the deliberate, consultative aspects of the shared governance process that we're all accustomed to. And I think that's one of the reasons why we saw a burst of no confidence votes involving those kinds of disputes.
Because the pace of change
Yeah,
increased, yeah, and the stakes increased at the
had to
same
be
time.
made quickly, yes. And it was hard to make those sometimes with the faculty feeling that they'd had sufficient opportunity to participate in debate about what to do and how a university should respond.
I joke, and I say this lovingly among friends and clients and colleagues, higher ed is the only place where a vote of 12 to 1 is a tie. Um,
Yeah.
and I think there's such value placed on a deliberate, intentional process, debate, reaching consensus. Um, do you think that's at odds with the pace at which leaders need to work today? How are we going to square that circle if everybody's expecting a higher level of consultation than might be possible to meet the moment? How do we resolve that?
Yeah, well, that's a great
I'm sure
question.
there's an easy answer, right?
Yeah.
No.
There actually is,
Oh,
right?
good.
Because you're going to have to push decision making and ownership of those things that drive outcomes much deeper into an institution. Let's just take academic restructuring. If you're hiring people and you're stacking them with overloads or stipends, or you're not producing the credit hours required to level set the cost of instruction up against, and you go through those hard decisions of balancing that, a president, a CFO, a provost cannot do that by themselves, right? Deans need to understand that. They need to own, right, the allocations of resources that drive outcomes. Chairs need to own that. Now, we have to incentivize that ownership, right? So if you give delegated authority to make decisions and you make good decisions, there needs to be a reward structure. You grow it, you make it, you keep it, you allocate it after you pay the fixed overheads that drive an institution. Then you start paying a little bit more attention. The fact that we may have a department with 17 tenured full faculty members and 10 majors, right?
Right.
Doesn't work, right? The first line of defense is to say, oh, look, bad decisions. We can't give this up. We can't give that up. You need to be sitting on the same side of the table making those
Right.
decisions.
You,
It takes training, it takes process, it takes empowerment, a new kind of structure. And if we don't do that, right, then this kind of adversarial who makes decisions basically over resources, right, then that conflict's going to be very difficult to resolve in this environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think of the great book Teams of Teams by Stanley McChrystal, and the thesis of which is you have to delegate and empower people and push decision making out in order to move quickly. But the precondition for that is having already built the trust and the relationships. When something's on fire is not the time to that relationship. You have to already have it in place. And I think that's also part of why, I mean, I would guess that's part of why new leaders are overrepresented in your data, in your survey, because they haven't had that time to build that trust and rapport to enable that kind of delegation or otherwise.
One of the recommendations we make in the book is to develop more financial literacy among faculty and staff about an institution. But to do that on a more regular, routine basis, as opposed to waiting until there's a crisis to do it. When it's done only in the heat of a crisis, faculty tend to be more suspicious that they're being fed a line by administrators, as opposed to a situation where there's been a kind of open book budgeting that's
Right.
gone on over the years, and it's become an expectation that there's regular structures in the institution to participate in financial planning and decision making, understanding that at the end of the day, it's the president who's responsible for making that decision and the board for overseeing that and evaluating how well the job is being done.
And Elliot, one of the things we would say we probably learned more from was from the faculty leadership. There was deliberation, there was angst, there was definitely a toll taken when things got to a point where they feel as if a no confidence vote's required. I think probably Mike served as a faculty member, he served as a provost. That's perhaps an understanding he had more firsthand, but I think I learned more, Mike, from some of our faculty voices.
Well, we certainly learned from faculty voices that a no confidence vote is distressing for them as well as for the target. We heard frequently that it was an emotionally wrenching experience, that there were severe disagreements among the faculty about whether it was wise to take the vote, whether expressing no confidence was going to hurt the institution, whether if they voted one way or the other, they're going to be ostracized by their fellow faculty. I was surprised to learn not about the emotional upheaval it caused presidents and chancellors. I was surprised by the toll it took on faculty as well.
Yeah, so the message is to start building that trust. Organizational effectiveness, to me, so much of it is about the rhythm and the rituals and setting that cadence as to how you're reporting, how you're getting feedback to whom about what, so that you're prepared and you're ready and you've built those relationships and you've built those rituals around sharing results, being open with folks, and doing what you can to avoid the kind of all this, where's this coming from kind of thing. And we've been talking about tension between administration and faculty and program cuts and financial exigency or financial distress. I'd love to bring this down to the day-to-day student experience. How does a vote of no confidence, or how do these tensions or these fractures or these disconnects, how do these show up for students? What's the impact on them?
Mike's earlier comment that this isn't a singular catalytic kind of moment, but there's a buildup. It's kind of like a snowstorm, right? It accumulates up to a point, and it's really the symptoms that probably has a more direct impact on students and student experience than somewhat of the either consequential or symbolic act of a no confidence vote. A lot of it depends on sector, a lot of it depends on size. Small private colleges are very intimate communities, and the students feel the stress of their faculty members. Now, sometimes faculty members at times may share that stress a little bit openly. So sometimes they may even mobilize and at the extreme may even weaponize students to be a part of the resistance. And we could have a whole nother discussion about that, because certainly within this social media environment, there's not a whole lot left to be unsaid. It's just how you say it and what it means. But on the other hand, students know. They understand when resources are scarce. They understand if supports and services perhaps aren't at the level that they expect, whether
Right.
that's
Or
real.
their major gets cut or whatever it might be. Yeah.
When you go to eliminating or reducing offerings, yes, that's where. And I think there's a lot of conversation today about the value of the major, but students have incredible affinity and loyalty to their programs, mainly because they have incredible loyalty and affection for their faculty. Perhaps sometimes more than we even measure at times. And I, in my current role, get to counsel a lot of campuses that are struggling. But I always tell senior leaders that students can be the best part of your solution. They need to be engaged. They need to know. Going through the worst of it at Henderson, did a town hall with students and sat in a circle. And one young lady raised her hand and said, "Hey, Dr. Ambrose, I know what you're talking about. It's hard sitting in a lab section of one when you're the only student. Nobody else is there to answer questions, right? I would have expected that I would have had a lab partner. So you're having to make adjustments on under-enrolled courses or programs that students know. I think that students and student success is an absolute critical element of the equation of shared governance, that they have as much awareness and engagement and perhaps even ownership in how we allocate resources and what they go to as any other stakeholder on campus. And that can change the narrative. And the one pull through that Mike and I have found through a diverse set of voices that are included within the book is structure and culture. And through your work, you're trying to connect structure to change culture. Would that be?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
And this shared governance conversation and somewhat of how to deal with difficult questions and how to engage a campus in being an outcomes focused, student success driven campus, it has elements of, and many of the strife is culture screaming out saying, let's do something different, right? Because what we're doing right now is not working.
I think we've already heard some great solutions, but you have some great recommendations in the book. So far, you've talked about better orientation. We've talked about shared governance and involving students, but you have 10 recommendations in the book, which I think is a great place to end. So give us a sense of how people can proactively avoid these votes, these tensions, these fractures, these disconnects.
We put them in three categories, Elliot. One has to do with the composition and the functioning of governing boards. And one of the specific recommendations we make in that category is to have faculty be voting members of governing boards. Some institutions have that already. A larger number have students as voting members on their governing boards. But there's been a hesitancy to put faculty on them because of the concern that they'll vote too often just to support their self-interests.
Or they may be unionized, which can create
Correct.
complexities in that structure.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we recognize those issues, but we think that it's better to have them participate in governing decisions than to protest those officially later on through a no confidence vote. Second category is one we've already talked about, and that is to improve the campus understanding of its academic and financial performance so that it's well versed in what it costs to educate a student and what the future looks like in terms of the financial wherewithal of the school. And then the third category is a recommitment to shared governance and a kind of ongoing evaluation of how it's working. And we make some specific suggestions under that category as well.
I hope folks check this out. I think it's so timely, it's so important, and it's so insightful. Where can folks find the book?
Readily available, obviously on Amazon. Elliot, you know how that works.
Yeah.
And also at Hopkins Press. They were a good partner throughout this process. And at the same time, we really value what people think, always willing to engage, Elliot, just in thinking forward about where we are and how to make higher ed better. And the Amazon engine's built on reviews. And so leave one, right? Whether you like it or don't or disagree, it's always good to That's probably
Those really help.
They really
help.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. They help more people see it, but they also help those people understand whether it's a fit. So I hope folks not only read it, but review it. I certainly will.
Initial publication date is today, Elliot. So the book is available for order either through Amazon or other online outlets or through Johns Hopkins University Press itself.
Great stuff. Mike, Chuck, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Elliot, thanks for keeping us connected.
Thank you.
Nice. I think we at least got to double digits, so that was good.
All right. See you, Chuck.
Thank you both.
Okay.
See you, Mike.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Connected College podcast. Go to elliottfelix.com for more information about my book, The Connected College, articles I've written, and talks I've given. There's also tools you can download, information on upcoming events, and information on booking me to speak at your institution or organization. Please support the podcast by rating it and reviewing it wherever you're listening. Let's create connected colleges where all students succeed.